This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, global stocks fell today as a rout in global bond markets sent yields flying. That spooked investors today, raising fears that the heavy losses suffered could trigger distressed selling in other assets. Now, that knocked nearly 3% from emerging market stocks, setting the benchmark index for its biggest weekly fall since March 2020. It fell almost 6% on the day. Also coming up on today's show. Côte d'Ivoire becomes the second country to receive COVID-19 vaccines from WHO's COVAX initiative. The Democratic Republic of Congo in a deal with Roche Pharmaceuticals for free cancer treatment in the country. And strawberry farmers in northern Nigeria are hampered by rising insecurity in the region. Well, we start off today's show in Côte d'Ivoire. The country has become the second after Ghana to receive COVID-19 vaccines from the COVAX vaccine sharing facility. A plane carrying over 500,000 doses touched down in the commercial capital of Abidjan, paving the way for the West African nation to launch a vaccination campaign. Now, by the end of this year, COVAX plans to deliver nearly 2 billion doses to over 90 low and middle income nations. Hopefully, this will level the playing field that has seen wealthier nations vaccinate millions, while comparatively few have received shots in poorer parts of the world. Africa's reported COVID-19 death toll surpassed 100,000 last week. This is much less than other continents, but sub-Saharan Africa may face a potential third wave of infections.
Ivory Coast is already amongst the first 27 countries that have managed the pandemic well so far. Our economy has suffered less. This delivery comes in the context of this performance. But I would like to call on the international community, the technical and financial partners, that the fight against this pandemic must be done in fairness. Equality in the fight enables our countries to get the right to the vaccines, just like the great nations. So we are for the equity in the management of the pandemic.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has given a unanimous approval to a resolution which calls for improved access to COVID-19 vaccines in conflict-hit or impoverished nations. Now, this is according to diplomats. This, of course, is the second resolution passed by the Council on the pandemic since it began a year ago. In a rare gesture, the proposal was co-sponsored by all 15 members of the Council. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been calling on the world's largest economies to create a task force to plan and coordinate a global COVID-19 vaccination plan. Now, he has also been urging for consideration to poor nations. And the African Union is backing calls for drug makers to waive some intellectual property rights on COVID-19 medicines and vaccines. This is in efforts to speed up rollout to poor countries. Now, South Africa and India made the proposal to the World Trade Organization in October last year. Both countries manufacture drugs and vaccines and argue that intellectual property rights are hindering scale-up in production of medical products. Now, some Western nations have opposed the move, citing that the ban will restrain innovation. This is through the killing the drive by pharmaceutical companies to make investments in research and development. The director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, John Nkengasong, says that IP transfer will address inequalities in global public health. Well, let's head to the DRC now. The country has opened the first cancer lab at the university clinics of Kinshasa under a new partnership with global pioneer in pharmaceuticals and diagnostics, Roche. Now, the 5-year partnership agreement with the government seeks to expand access to cancer medicines and healthcare services for the Congolese people. This will increase investment in programs that strengthen the country's healthcare system and infrastructure, with Roche contributing a significant amount of the co-investment. The agreement also provides for the establishment of 7 new cancer labs, 3 of which will open in 2021. Now, cancer represents one of the most significant public health challenges in the DRC, with nearly 50,000 new cases diagnosed per year and about 34,000 cancer deaths per year. Well, let's find out more about the program from Jean-Claude Vimpikula. He's the general manager for Roche in Congo. Great to have you with us from Kinshasa, Mr. Vimpikula. Now, of course, cancer is a significant public health challenge for the DRC. As we mentioned earlier, nearly 50,000 new cases are diagnosed per year. So give us a sense as to why Roche decided to throw its hat in the country's fight to improve access to cancer medicines and, of course, healthcare services in the country.
Yeah. Thank you for having me here online. Really, we appreciate, because this attention is important for this country. Roche, being one of the leaders in the cancer treatment, is mindful of its societal responsibilities and has the 5 or 10 years ambition to serve 5 times more patients faster at half the cost to society and to double access to diagnostics. So as one organization with pharmaceutical and diagnostics division under one roof, Roche wanted to be bold with a one Roche approach to improve patients' lives and have an impact on the ecosystem in every country. So to achieve the above, countries like DRC, one of the most popular countries in Africa, shouldn't be ignored. And the best way to do it was to involve the government through a partnership agreement like we did, as you mentioned.
Of course, this is the second partnership of this kind in Africa. We know back in 2019, Roche did sign a similar partnership agreement with Côte d'Ivoire. Will we see a similar project where Roche provides unlimited access to medicines for free? Give us the details of the rollout in the DRC.
Yes, the partnership is similar to the one in Côte d'Ivoire, whereby patients will have access to all the Roche cancer treatment grouped in a basket of products, in which will be added new launched products should there be a need for them, without changing the government commitment or the budget. So we will have different kind of cancer, and the government will have a quantification of patients who will need our product, and then the supply will be done according to the government need and the patient need. And it should be noted that there was no cancer program in DRC, as you mentioned, like in Côte d'Ivoire, at the time of signing the partnership. And the Ministry of Health has set up a national cancer for fight against cancer in line with Roche advice. And the center will build a national strategic cancer plan with the support of Roche.
Definitely quite an interesting project. Now, Roche is also opening up a new office in Kinshasa going forward. It will also support the Republic of Congo and Gabon. So this certainly signals a long-term commitment to the region for the company. What are the company's plans in the healthcare sector in the region? Will we see other major projects like this?
Yes, you're right. Roche plan, in few words, Roche plan is to go beyond selling treatment and diagnostics solutions. We want to be the best healthcare partner by building with governments of this country. You mentioned a co-funded, sustainable mechanism for cancer care and other diseases. Like we are present already with the USAID in DRC fighting HIV. So all the project will come, and also we are open to new partners to come and join us, so we can have for each patient a holistic treatment support, because we cannot provide everything. So we want partners to bring their solutions, to bring their support for patients.
Well, we will certainly be watching those projects closely. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. That was Jean-Claude Vimpi-Kula, General Manager for Roche in Congo. And now to some corporate headlines today. The operator of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in South Africa is seeing opportunities for growth in Asia. The move seeks to address market concentration on the bourse and a dwindling number of listed companies. Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore and China are amongst the markets the JSE is exploring to arrest a trend that saw 20 companies delist in 2020. Meanwhile, British Airways owner IAG has posted a loss of $5.31 billion in 2020. The company said that the ongoing uncertainty and duration of COVID-19 meant that it could not provide a future profit forecast. It also added that its focus continues to be on cutting costs to reduce cash burn to try to ride out the crisis. And Boeing has agreed to pay $6.6 million in penalties to the Federal Aviation Administration. This is after U.S. regulators said it failed to comply with a 2015 safety agreement and cited other safety concerns. The new settlement also covers FAA allegations that Boeing managers exerted undue pressure on Boeing workers performing certification duties for the FAA at the company's South Carolina plant. And finally, Facebook has ended a one-week blackout of Australian news on its popular social media site. The social media giant also announced preliminary commercial agreements with 3 small local publishers. The blackout was a retaliation after the government passed a law forcing it and Alphabet's Google to pay local media companies for using content on their platforms. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Moody's downgrades Tunisia over rising debt and social unrest. And mobile lending apps in Kenya on the spot for high interest loans and other predatory practices.
NPC and CPPCC, China's biggest annual political gathering of lawmakers and political advisors. As the world's second largest economy recovers from the pandemic, it chalks out plans for the coming year and beyond. With new proposals, laws, and targets, CGTN brings you unmatched coverage of the meetings that matter. Exclusive interviews, people's voices, in-depth analysis, and the impact on the rest of the world. China's 2 sessions begins March 4th. Live and exclusive on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Now, ratings agency Moody's has downgraded Tunisia's credit rating to B3. That is 6 notches below investment grade. Now, the downgrade reflects Tunisia's weak economic standing that has been marked by increasing debt and social unrest in the recent weeks. From Tunisia, CGTN's Adnan Ashaushi with the latest.
The New York-based credit rating agency Moody's Investor Service downgraded Tunisia's long-term foreign currency and local currency issuer ratings to B3 from B2 with negative outlook. It also downgraded the Central Bank of Tunisia's senior unsecured rating, as the apex bank is legally responsible for the payments on all of the government's bonds.
The recent rating reflects the latest macroeconomic indicators in general, especially the growth rate, the business climate, and the level of public debt. The central bank is pushing for reforms in order to improve the country's economic performance. Moody's also explained the political situation and the social unrest are among the factors for cutting Tunisia's rating and its negative indicators.
The Secretary General of the Tunisian Financial Analysis Committee at the Central Bank of Tunisia added that the downgrade reflects weakening governance in the face of rising social challenges. Recent political turmoil in the country has slowed government's plan to introduce social and economic reforms in the North African state.
The repercussions of this rating are negative on the country's image. Tunisia's solvency is at stake on the international market. Without deep and structural reforms, Tunisia will not be able to revive its economy and guarantee financing from international financial institutions and governments, because this could be considered as risky.
Economists maintain that Tunisia needs to reform its costly public service, which is made up of some 800,000 employees. The state is said to have borrowed to meet its recurrent expenditure at the expense of investment and development. Moody's latest rating is likely to make costs of credit higher.
This rating B3 with the negative outlook is very dangerous. It literally means that whenever the state borrows money, it's impossible to borrow with less than 10% interest rate. If we add the inflation and the fall of the exchange rate, the final interest would be around 16 to 17%. This would be disastrous to the economy.
Tunisia's Council of Joint Chambers has urged the government to launch an ambitious, large-scale plan to boost national and international investment. This plan would generate sustainable growth and improve the country's rating in the next 12 months. Last April, the IMF approved a $745 million emergency loan for Tunisia to help the country mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on its economy. Experts assert that the North African state is facing the worst economic crisis in decades. Adan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's head to South Africa now. The country is ready to reap the benefits of a decade-long research and development project in hydrogen fuel cell technologies. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the project is ready to move into the implementation phase and will see a significant boost in local manufacturing of low-carbon technologies. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
Fuel cell technology is gaining popularity around the world as a clean energy source. South Africa is well placed to expand the use of this technology, as it holds 80% of the world's reserves of platinum group metals, which is a key input of fuel cell technology. Hydrogen fuel cells produce electricity by means of a chemical reaction. Platinum is the catalyst.
We are establishing a Platinum Valley as an industrial cluster which brings together various hydrogen applications in the country to form an integrated hydrogen ecosystem. This initiative will identify concrete project opportunities to kickstart hydrogen cell manufacturing in promising hubs. It will also facilitate the commercialization of homegrown intellectual property.
Researchers heading the project believe using hydrogen as an energy carrier could potentially reduce South Africa's dependence on fossil fuels and help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
The intention of this Platinum Valley is to create an area where the use of hydrogen fuel cell technologies can be increased where it makes sense, but also, so that's really increasing the use of fuel cell technologies in the automobile sector, so heavy duty trucks, buses, also really showing that you can have the penetration of what we call clean energy technologies.
Fuel cell technology fits perfectly in with South Africa's minerals beneficiation strategy, which identifies PGMs as strategic minerals to support job creation and diversification of the economy through green technology. Fuel cells are already powering several off-grid projects in the country. These include a high school in Limpopo and the one military hospital as a response to COVID-19.
So what we hope to do is create an environment of learning, adoption of new technologies, reducing the barriers all in one area. But also, I think what's exciting for us is the innovation or development of this country. And it hasn't been what we call equal.
The demand for PGMs is expected to boom this year as more countries around the world move to reduce their carbon emissions and tightened legislation. South Africa is well positioned to benefit from both higher prices and increased output, which will help it to move full steam ahead with its fuel cell technology. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Africa's government announced plans to allocate $688 million for coronavirus vaccines, and that's amid an expected recovery from pre-pandemic recession. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni made the announcement when he released the country's national budget earlier in the week. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more.
The COVID pandemic has hit the country the hardest on the continent, with close to 50,000 deaths recorded.
We are allocating more than 10 billion rand for the purchase and delivery of vaccines over the next 2 years. But we do not stop there. We are increasing the contingency reserve from 5 billion to 12 billion to make provision for any further purchases of vaccines and to cater for any other emergencies.
The two-year split sees 5.2 billion rand for 2021-22 and 3 billion rand for 22-2023. According to analysts, Mboweni plans to manage the second and anticipated third waves of the pandemic by allocating a separate 8 billion rand for provincial health departments in 2021-22.
He's had a little bit of a windfall, and although he thinks the windfall is about 100 billion, it may be less, but it's certainly enough for him to have a little bit of extra money to pay for the vaccines.
The importance of funding the vaccine buying program can't be overemphasized.
Even if we had to borrow that from whoever, that 10 billion, it'll pay for itself over and over again, because obviously vaccinating the population, it's almost like that the fiscal multipliers of having a healthy population, or population that's able to participate in the workforce, that is able to go to school and so forth, the rewards are way greater than this short run cost.
But the funding needs aren't being only met by the government.
The private sector is probably going to contribute between 5 and 8 billion, I understand. So in total, the South African vaccines are going to cost us roughly, say, 18 billion.
Some analysts are cautious about the vaccination timelines and when the money will be allocated.
So is it a good idea? Absolutely. Is it foolproof? Definitely not. And I don't think in our budget we've got enough space, actually. Should it not work as it's supposed to, I don't think we've got enough fiscal space allocated to sort of these contingency plans at all.
So vaccines are essential for the economy returning to normal. It's not the only thing that needs to happen, but it certainly is the one basic thing that will have to happen.
Even with the government allocation and the private sector contribution, it's unlikely that South Africa will see a growth rate of greater than 3.3% at the end of 2021 and 1.9% at the end of 2022. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's shift our focus to Kenya now, where mobile lending apps are on the spot for high interest rates and other predatory practices. The government has now put in place a bill that seeks to license and regulate these popular apps. They have become an easy source of credit for many Kenyans who don't have accounts with banks and other traditional financial institutions. Well, let's get the latest on that sector from Ivan Mboy. He's a general manager at mobile lending app Tala here in Kenya. Great to have you on the show with us today, Mr. Ivan. Well, let's start off with the fact that the increased demand for digital and online services prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic has been a huge win for fintech and, of course, digital services, not just in Africa, but globally. Give us a sense or look into how digital lending platforms specifically have fared since COVID-19.
Well, thank you very much. So COVID-19 has been a very interesting period for us in the digital lending sector. From the demand side, we saw tremendous appreciation for our digital first services from consumers, especially as they saw traditional financial services players pull back from supplying them. However, also on the supply side of many of our fintech platforms, we also had to balance a rather tricky situation with many of our consumers effectively having income shocks in the way of losing their jobs, sort of having furloughed salaries, and or having their businesses slowed down. And so what we saw is increased appreciation for fintech. At the same time, many fintech platforms found it prudent to sort of have a wait and see approach. Thankfully, I think we've gone through the worst of COVID. And as we entered Q4 of last year, moving into this year, we saw tremendous recovery and uptick from our customers and their underlying businesses. And so we've been able to, I'd say, restart supply of credit as fintech platforms into our various economies. And so, yes, I'd say in short, it's been a sort of slight period where as much as there's demand, I think there was some hesitation from our side on the supply side. But as we saw our consumers and economies recover, we have been able to sort of plow back capital to our customers.
Well, looking at the industry in Kenya right now, we know digital lenders have been getting a bad rep, as we mentioned earlier. They're accused of issuing high interest loans, predatory practices as well. Regulators are taking action. We know that there is a bill coming on board where we'll see the central bank licensing and regulating digital lenders. At least that's a bill that's been looked at right now. How do you feel about this new legislation?
So actually, contrary to public opinion, we as the digital lenders who form part of the Digital Lenders Association Kenya are actually in favor of a responsible regulation. And really responsible regulation for us looks like regulation that protects consumers, but at the same time, does not stifle the innovation that has been driven by fintech platforms. And so ultimately, we do acknowledge that there have been some, I'd say, consumer interest breaches from some bad actors in our space. And you see this in the form of unclear contracts, collection practices, and in some cases pricing. But at the same time, the vast majority of players have actually been driving the financial inclusion agenda. If you look at our general industry, we are responsible for providing credit to millions of Kenyans. And so I think that as much as we embrace regulation, we want to make sure that it doesn't really throw out the baby with the bathwater or stifle innovation. And so we look forward to working with future regulators in the form of the central bank and legislators who are now considering the wording and structure of these future regulations.
Well, we are also seeing tech firms such as Google stepping up and taking those measures to protect consumers. They are barring some digital lending apps right now. How will this impact the sector? And give us a sense of what players are doing to improve how they do business given all these factors.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I think there are a lot of mixed opinions on, let's say, the role that platforms like Google are playing, where they are effectively not government bodies, but do have tremendous sway and power to enforce standards. I think that they've done some great work in certain geographies like the US around regulating the sort of consumer payday loan providers. We are actually also working with players like Google to make sure that we sensitize them around what are sensible guidelines for some of our geographies. So for example, I think about 2 years ago, you had Google coming forth and perhaps saying that all players should provide loans that are a minimum of 60 days. But sometimes, while that may actually seem like a prudent move, many of our customers actually sometimes need credit for about 24 hours. If you think of the typical use case of a market trader who wants to borrow some capital in the morning, buy their stock, sell it, and repay their loan, we want to make sure that as much as Google is taking the very unusual, but I'd say useful role, also policing our space, that they're doing so in a way that makes sense for local economies. So in short, we stand ready to work with them as well in trying to sort of shape a responsible operating environment, since many of our apps are only available on their platforms.
Well, Well, we do have to leave it there, but many thanks for your insights, Ivan. That, of course, is Ivan Mboy, is the general manager at mobile lending app Tala. Well, let's take a short break now, still to come on the show. China's employment rate for 2020 comes out better than expected. And 2 billionaires in South Korea go against the grain and pledge to give half their wealth to charity.
No war, no one again he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Well, here's a quick recap of other headlines this hour. Police in Zamfara, Nigeria have confirmed the abduction of 317 girls from a school in the northern state. A joint search and rescue mission with the military has been mounted, according to a statement by police. Now, armed bandits raided the Jangebe Government Girls Secondary School around 1 a.m. local time. This is the second such kidnapping in Nigeria's north in 9 days. Meanwhile, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, is concerned about a potential third wave of the coronavirus in sub-Saharan Africa, even though case numbers are coming down. The emergency humanitarian organization is calling on wealthier nations and pharmaceutical companies to help ensure developing nations have access to effective and affordable vaccines. And in Zimbabwe, the government has announced plans to buy an additional 1.2 million vaccines from China. The doses will be bought at a preferential price. China has also agreed to donate more vaccines. Of course, Zimbabwe began vaccinations last week after receiving a donation of 200,000 doses of the Sinopharm jab. And finally, Zambian experts have been speaking on China's transformation from an agrarian society into the world's second largest economy. They say it should be emulated. They also say China's economic policy has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of extreme poverty, which is equivalent to populations of several nations in Africa. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, let's get you some international news now. Chinese authorities say the country's employment rate for 2020 was better than expected and will likely remain stable despite uncertainties both at home and overseas.
Even as COVID-19 dealt a heavy blow to China's job market in 2020, the overall employment rate finished the year strongly.
A total of 11.86 million new urban jobs were created over the year, which is more than the 9 million jobs target that was expected. The surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas, which stood at 6.2% in February last year, fell each quarter to 5.2% in December of the 2020.
Officials say over 90% of college graduates landed jobs at the end of last year, along with more than 32 million impoverished workers, a 10% increase from the number in 2019. Many of the workers were supported by China's drive to eradicate extreme poverty.
As the economy continues to stabilize and improve, officials say the job market this year will continue to remain generally stable. But the pressure on overall employment remains unchanged. And when it's combined with structural challenges and COVID-19 pandemic, they say the uncertainties are here to stay.
We will put in efforts to stabilize the market and focus on key groups such as college graduates and migrant workers, for which we will implement classified and precise assistance and provide targeted employment services.
Authorities have pledged to broaden employment channels and support the development of labor-intensive industries. That includes small, micro, and medium-sized enterprises, as well as helping laborers start their own businesses. They're also promising to improve labor security around flexible employment and create more jobs. Dakai, CGTN.
Meanwhile, up to 90% of U.S. companies in China say they see a bright future in China's market. That is according to a white paper published on Friday by the American Chamber of Commerce in South China. CGTN's Lu Siriu has the details.
China remains an attractive option when it comes to foreign investment, according to over 200 foreign companies interviewed by the American Chamber of Commerce in South China. 94% of U.S. companies are optimistic about the business environment in China, with none looking to withdraw completely. And the vast majority of companies still have plans to expand in the country sometime over the next 3 years.
We know that 73% have budgeted additional funds in order to reinvest in 2021 to expand their existing business and operations. The one thing that has affected them the most, has had an impact on their ability to invest in China, is the fact that many of our executives are not in China and they're still overseas. So I think we need to work together with China to find a way to bring as many executives back as possible, to bring extra people who aren't working here, but they need to look for the opportunities and verify the investment opportunities to make those investments.
There are challenges, though. The paper highlights 3 in particular: the rising cost of labor, more expensive operations, and a lack of qualified personnel. China confirms that technology and innovation will be top policy priorities from 2021 to 2025. Experts say this tech-driven strategy will not only benefit foreign companies, but domestic ones also.
For talents, I think with all those Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau, science and technology innovation corridor, and all those science centers in the region, we see a great potential and anticipate freer flow of talents in the region.
The chamber also says they will continue to encourage Chinese government to further open up economy for foreign investment. And at the same time, they are calling on Washington to return to the negotiating table so the relations can improve. Lu Sirui, CGTN, Guangzhou.
Well, let's head to the United States now, where some positive economic numbers after its fourth quarter growth figures were revised higher and weekly jobless claims dropped. But as Owen Fairclough now explains, the optimism is partly driven by the prospects of another enormous stimulus plan, one that might be scaled back.
It's a mere 1/10 of a percentage point higher, but for some, revised US economic growth of 4.1 instead of 4% for the last quarter speaks volumes. That revised figure was released at the same time as new data showing the lowest weekly unemployment claims for 3 months. Overall unemployment is 6.3%, almost double the rate a year ago, but a steep drop from nearly 15% last April when the pandemic first swept the US.
Some of the optimism about a strong recovery is being driven by prospects for a $1.9 trillion stimulus package, the third of its kind in a year. But Republicans are battling Democrats over their aim to include in the deal a rise in the minimum wage for the country's lowest earners, who've been hit the hardest by the pandemic.
And even if stimulus checks of $1,400 are likely to be agreed in a scaled-back stimulus plan, the head of the US Central Bank is urging caution about economic growth.
We're still 10 million jobs below the level of payroll jobs before the crisis. There's still a long way to go.
Despite that, some economists think annual output for this year will surge as much as 6%, the highest since 1984. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Now, while the US has certainly beefed up its COVID-19 testing, there's still plenty to be desired. And now one company is trying to make it as easy as getting a can of Coke out of a vending machine. CGTN's Mark New has the details from Oakland, California.
touchdown at Oakland International Airport, and upon arriving, grab makeup accessories, an energy bar, or a COVID-19 home test kit.
It makes so much sense, like all these other vending machines, you know. If there's a CVS one, why not for COVID protection and all that?
We're very excited to be the first airport in the United States to sell COVID test kits in vending machines, because we realize that people are concerned when they're traveling that they may have been exposed while on vacation. And so we wanted to give them an option to get tested when they got home.
For around $150, the test kit allows people to put their saliva sample in a container, ship it via a FedEx label, and get results sent to their phone within 24 to 48 hours. And Oakland International Airport is just the beginning. The company that makes the test kits, Wellness for Humanity, says it is close to installing vending machines in 10 other airports. Wellness for Humanity also has 2 vending machines at its headquarters in New York, where people can order ahead, then pick up their COVID-19 test kits using a QR code for a contactless experience. It's partnering with major vending machine companies like Swift in hopes of installing 1,000 vending machines over the next half year.
We're actually looking to use the amount of vending machines that we're putting out there to be prepared for anything else that may arise in the future. And so whatever that is supplies for hurricane or whatever that is another pandemic, we're creating this powerful supply chain so we always have a quick way to answer.
Stuklik says that also means entering an emerging business sector called biohacking. They're aiming to use their network of vending machines to someday distribute all kinds of next-level health analysis, like DNA ancestry and even microbiome tests, which examine the bacteria of the gut.
Essentially, it means taking charge of your own biology based on cutting-edge science. And part of that whole process is figuring out your results. We want to be able to give, DNA testing, give microbiome testing at a discounted rate where people have a quick access for, home use. And that's kind of our future of wellness to us.
So the next time you look at a vending machine, it could be far more than an opportunity to buy a souvenir. It could be the platform for learning about the current state of your body and its future health. Mark New, CGTN, Oakland, California.
And moving on, 2 self-made South Korean billionaires have pledged to give away half their fortunes, a rarity in a country where business is dominated by family-controlled conglomerates and charity often begins and ends at home. Well, the philanthropic initiative was set up by Bill and Melinda Gates alongside Warren Buffett for billionaires to give away at least half their wealth. Most of South Korea's ultra-wealthy are largely descendants of the founders of the chaebol, the sprawling, usually family-run conglomerates that powered the country's post-war boom and still dominate its economy.
이런 지배 구조를 자신을 중심으로 해서
Chaebols are fixated on maintaining their wealth because they want to hold on to their corporate power. In order to maintain their inherited wealth or corporate power, they cannot easily donate their own wealth, which would bring collapse to the structure of power. Chaebols believe that they won't have many problems maintaining their businesses without giving back to society. As for venture companies, they believe that their profit is based on their increasing market value, and so straying away from consumers would bring a hit to their companies. Of course, they should give back to society because the profit they make is partially due to their own competence, but mostly thanks to the contribution of other people, the state and society.
Well, Friday marks the traditional Chinese Lantern Festival. It is sometimes called ancient China's version of Valentine's Day. But due to the coronavirus pandemic, young people are now embracing a new trend this year. CGTN's Yu Yang with the report.
The Lantern Festival is celebrated every year on the 15th day of the first lunar month. In ancient China, young men and women would take to the streets to enjoy lantern shows. And this provided an opportunity for them to meet the right person. But in modern China, things have certainly changed.
Nowadays, young people do not have to go outside at all to find a love. All they have to do is go online or download an app to find a suitable date.
We provide users with matchmaking and wedding planning services. We've arranged many online blind dating activities in several cities across China, including Shenzhen, Nanjing, Wuhan, and so on. Tens of thousands of single men and women have taken part, and over 90% of them have found their match.
To find a potential match, all users have to do is fill in their personal information and the qualifications and the characteristics they look for in a partner. Then big data goes to work, helping them find their date. 23-year-old Zhang Jingwen is among those who's taken advantage of the technology.
I use the online dating app because it's more convenient for young people. We go to work every day, social circles are quite small, and we don't have too much time to meet other people. So online dating provides us with a chance to get to know each other.
Statistics from China's online dating giant Zhenai.com shows that since last year, the number of people registering on their app to look for a partner has risen.
We set up the online blind dating app last year, and until now, the number of registered users has increased 8-fold compared to the same period last year.
Zhang is one of those lucky enough to score success.
I found my boyfriend during an online blind date last November. We were quite happy staying together. He always says it's advanced technology that changed our lives.
Data from the Chinese Ministry of Civil Affairs shows that in 2021, the number of single men and women reached 240 million in China. So online blind dating could offer those still looking for a chance at everlasting love. Yu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
And on that note, let's shift focus to commodity markets today. Copper prices continuing to climb above $9,000 per ton this week. The metal's price did fall about 2% today, but analysts say this could be short-term pauses for profit-taking as the overall long-term narrative for copper appears robust. Meanwhile, oil also falling today as a collapse in bond prices and gains in the dollar made the dollar-priced oil more expensive for holders of other currencies. Also, crude supply is expected to rise back to prices above pre-pandemic levels. Gold inching higher today after hitting a one-week low, but headed for a second straight weekly and monthly decline as brighter economic outlooks and inflation fears propped up U.S. Treasury yields. Well, let's take a short break now. Still coming up on the show. Strawberry farmers in northern Nigeria see increased output if security is improved.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, South Africa is forging ahead with a new petroleum legislation that aims to unlock the country's oil and gas potential. The Upstream Petroleum Resources Development Bill is removed from those governing it under the mining sector. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more with that report.
South Africa's Upstream Petroleum Resources Development Bill is expected to promote greater exploration in upstream petroleum activities. The new petroleum code is also expected to shape the development and commercialization of the country's gas reserves. While this dedicated new petroleum legislation has been widely welcomed, investors are eager for greater detail.
The key thing here is that we need clarity. We need clarity as to what the conditions for exploration and for operation of licenses in South Africa is going to be. I think it's a good idea that they're separating mining from oil and gas, because those are two totally separate businesses with different business cycles and with different demand and supply.
The upstream gas sector has been one of the key priorities for the country as it looks to tap into the numerous benefits of its natural gas reserves. The full development of 2 gas reserves made by Total in South Africa's Mossel Bay has been halted, though, until the bill is published.
It's very understandable why Total has put it off, because Total is unsure what the implications of investing more money is going to be. And so Total needs to be able to get that clarity. And one thing South Africa needs to understand is that they're competing with Guyana. They're competing with Suriname at the moment. They're competing with the Gulf of Mexico. They're competing with the Gulf of Guinea. They're competing with Mozambique, which is next door.
South Africa's gas-to-power ambitions is one of the key drivers of the new petroleum bill, which will also create jobs and transition the economy to cleaner sources of energy. Some industry stakeholders believe the entire continent could benefit from better petroleum legislation, which can promote new investments.
With the African Free Trade Act, Continental Free Trade Act today, it is a step in the right direction, but now these governments need to go into these individual petroleum and oil and gas legislations they have and tear down the barriers and let investment flow in. That in itself would create jobs, build a bigger tax base, and really create the jobs of tomorrow. And the era of energy transition fuel our growth to really have our people being able to come back better and stronger out of COVID-19.
For now, the bill has gone through public consultation and is expected to pass through Parliament during the course of this year. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And to Nigeria now, where strawberry farmers in the northern part of the country say the country can generate more revenue from exporting the product, but only if the security situation improves. Now, the country's shift of focus from agriculture since its discovery of crude oil has created a scarcity of fruits grown domestically, such as strawberries. Here's CGTN's Tessem Akende reporting from Jos, Nigeria.
Strawberries in Nigeria can only be grown naturally in and around Nigeria's north-central city of Jos. 35-year-old Jerry Doubles is a strawberry farmer. He says there's a huge market for strawberries in the country.
Now, the demand is very high, but then say that there's a time where there are people not asking for strawberries is almost impossible.
But meeting the demand with local produce is a challenge. This strawberry farm is over 4 hectares. But the farmers here say if it wasn't for insecurity in the region, they would have expanded and grown more strawberries. In the first 6 weeks of 2021, more than 1,500 farmers across the country, including Jos, have lost their lives to herders and farmer clashes, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. Agriculturally, say the government needs to do more to address the challenges.
Nigeria has a lot of potentials. And compared to other countries like China, USA and Mexico, who are the world's largest strawberry producers, if we can meet up with them by expanding the production of strawberry. But because of lack of funds, insecurity and other things.
Strawberries are a rich source of vitamin C and other nutrients. The global strawberry market is projected to hit over $25 billion in 2025. And many consumers here say they prefer these locally grown strawberries.
I prefer to buy the strawberries here in Jos because they are naturally grown, sweet and better than the one we import.
It feels really good taking strawberries from Jos. I really hope farmers will be encouraged for improved yield.
But until insecurity in Jos is dealt with, farmers like Jerry Double say they won't taste the full potential of Nigeria's strawberry crop. Tassim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Now, the announcement of Nigerian-born Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as head of the World Trade Organization has led to widespread celebrations, especially amongst Nigerian women. For a nation that is tackling gender stereotypes and inequality, many see Iweala's appointment as an inspiration for other women breaking gender barriers. Well, CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam brings us the story of one of them, an automobile mechanic.
48-year-old Priscilla Ndika is an automobile mechanic in a suburb in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Growing up, Priscilla wanted to become an aeronautic engineer, but she found herself in automobile repairs and has been making her mark in the industry for nearly 3 decades. Her dexterity with fixing Volvo-branded cars earned her the name Madam Volvo.
I want to be separate. I want to be different from other girls that is doing other jobs, female jobs.
But her success in a male-dominated industry didn't come easily. In a society like Nigeria that's largely patriarchal, Priscilla has met with resistance and unequal treatment because of her gender.
As a female mechanic, men would like to intimidate you. But being a strong person inside the job and you know what you're doing, that challenges or the intimidations will not be, you will not regard it.
She's inspired by women like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the first woman and African appointed to lead the World Trade Organization.
I will say that she's my role model because I like her actions. She don't even mind what people will say. She will do the right thing. Her appointment and her lifestyle encourages us. It makes us to know that what a man can do, woman can do it better than the men. So she gives us joy.
Priscilla is able to pay her kids' school fees from her automobile repair earnings, but she says her greatest feat is inspiring other young women. She's trained over a dozen girls and wants to help more become self-dependent.
My plans to have a bigger workshop where I will be able to train more women, more girls. Instead of them relying on their parents or relying on men, they will concentrate and learn a trade that will benefit them in future. So if I can have the workshop well equipped, I will be able to train them.
Despite gender parity issues, the country's Bureau of Statistics shows that 40% of Nigerian women are entrepreneurs. It's one of the highest ratios of female business owners in the world. With the right support from institutions and government, many here believe that Nigerian women can achieve even greater feats. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand jumping as much as 1.2% after a near 4% plunge on Thursday, which we saw pull the currency into the red for the year. It had briefly hit 13-month highs on Wednesday after Finance Minister Tito Mbowene's budget speech did show a slightly faster economic rebound. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira strengthening at the official NAFEX window today, and that's despite a 79.3% drop in dollar supply in the country. Now, the rate remained stable in the parallel market, closing at around 480 naira per dollar. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.